Hello, I'm Lee Hatcher from HammondCare Public Affairs at our Braeside Hospital, continuing the great stories and conversations in the Profile series. Associate Professor Friedbert Kohler was involved in the planning and construction of Braeside from the early 90s. It finally opened in 1996. Today, he's Director of Medical Services at Braeside Hospital and Clinical Director of Aged Care Rehabilitation in Sydney Southwest. Friedbert, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the Profile series. Can you give us a brief history of how Braeside came into existence?
Well, Braeside initially existed in Stanmore and was opened in 1946 as a maternity hospital, later became an aged care and nursing facility. And then in the early 90s, as beds were moved from inner city to the west, it was planned that Braeside and the beds were moved out into southwest Sydney.
So there's a clear need in the west here.
There was an absolute need in the west. There was a lack of beds, and particularly subacute beds in southwest Sydney, and the need to open additional beds was very apparent.
You've very much invested your own career in Sydney's west. Why is that in particular, Friedbert?
My first job as staff specialist was in southwest Sydney. I enjoyed that. I was here previously as a registrar already, and the population of southwest Sydney particularly are relatively underserved from the point of view of medical and also again especially from the subacute point of view, and I've enjoyed coming out here and trying to assist in building up the services and strengthening the services.
Can I ask you about your own life outside of work for just a moment? Your church life is a foundational part of you and your family's life.
My church life is the basis of my philosophy and my lifestyle, and our whole family life revolves around our church life. I'm an honorary minister in our church. On Sundays I tend to preach in services, and also on Wednesdays and most evenings I'm busy after work doing some kind of voluntary church activity.
It was your faith that imprinted upon your mind the desire to go into medicine in the first place.
Having grown up in a religious family, I had always had the opportunity to see the benefits of serving others, and that indeed instilled the desire to continue to serve others in a professional career pathway, which medicine is one of many careers which you can do that.
What would you say have been some of the highlights of Braeside in the last 20 or so years?
Well, the highlight of Braeside was its design and its whole concept. The opening was a highlight, that it brought us a beautiful new facility with spacious grounds and spacious therapy rooms, purposefully designed. Further highlights were just recently we had our 18th birthday celebration, so we're coming of age as an institution in its own right. And from the point of view of rehabilitation, personal success and highlight was the opening of the day hospital, expanding our therapy from mainly inpatient care to non-inpatient care as well. The day hospital came about through an interesting conversation in the early days of Braeside Hospital. We once a year had a dinner with the board of Southwest Area Health Service, as it was in those days. And the clinical directors were invited, and I happened to sit next to some board members, and they asked me what we do, and I said, well, we do rehabilitation, but I was a little disappointed at the work we do, because essentially what we can do is teach people how to look after themselves, how to feed themselves, and how to meet their basic body needs. But I thought there was more to a fulfilled life than just meeting basic body needs. The discussion eventually involved most of the board members, and they all agreed that there was more to life than meeting basic body functions and needs, and to be able to facilitate such rehabilitation we would have to expand into a day hospital. Within 2 years we received funding to expand into a day hospital service.
And a very significant achievement at that.
It was a very significant achievement. It had taken some years of repeated negotiations, but it was a worthwhile dinner to have with the board from my perspective.
Well done. You say that the arena of disability in our community has understandably changed radically over these past few decades, but there are ways in which it hasn't changed. Tell me how those two dynamics have played out.
Well, disability has changed from many perspectives with increasing medical treatment and improved medical treatment. People who have disabilities live longer. People who would have previously succumbed to injuries now survive, but often with very severe disabilities. So from that perspective, disability has changed. The other perspective that, and probably the major change in disability in today's society, is the ageing of the population, and that results in significant increase in disability. So the profile of disability and the severity of disability has changed. There's also been some improvement in the treatment of stroke, for example, that is, in fact has reduced disability so that we get fewer of those patients. So there has been quite a significant shift in the kinds of patients and the way disability presents itself in the community. There are some things at the same time which haven't changed from the point of view really of disability management. And that is that disability invariably tends not to be a life-threatening situation, and therefore tends not to have the same profile as treatment of life-threatening situations. That's particularly evident when it comes to the staff which treat disability. The main arm of treatment for disability is therapists, either physiotherapist or occupational therapist or any of the other members of the multidisciplinary team. And it's often quite tempting in periods of economic rationalisation that one would cut the budget by decreasing the staff to patient ratio, whereas such kind of pressure would not be exerted or succumbed to for stopping a patient's medication, for example, which would in the end have the same result. One makes the patient feel better and maybe live a little longer. The other makes the patient feel better and have a better quality of life, and the two are equally important.
I know you're not in this for what you get out of it, but why are you in this job, and what does it do for you?
At the end of the day, when you have an individual, a patient who has severe limitations in their daily function and who is dependent on others for everything that they do, and over a period of time with therapy and with help and with encouragement and with treatment, they can recover some of their function. They become more independent or even totally independent. They can return to society and live either by themselves or with much less support than they would have required otherwise, maybe even return to work, return to hobbies and other activities which they've enjoyed previously. When you see such a transition from disability and impairment and activity limitation to relative independence, that's sufficient satisfaction for me.
Is there one particular person that you'd have in mind that you could say, yeah, in that case, that's why I'm in it?
There was a young gentleman who I saw quite early in my career. He had been severely disabled and was unable to move around by himself, was unable to look after his basic body functions. And he was in fact in the hospital when I came to start working in that particular hospital. Over a period of months, he was able with therapy to improve. We were able to assist him that he could manage his body functions, that he could get around by himself, that he could become independent in all of his self-care, and that in fact he could be reintegrated into his home environment and into his community. It was 10 years down the track that I ran into this patient again, and he came to me and he thanked me for the work which I had done for him. Unfortunately, he hadn't cared for himself that well, but it was still a great success because he was a person deserving of our assistance who had benefited greatly from that assistance.
One of many stories, I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm bound to ask you this about the bow ties, for which you are well known. How did they start, Friedbert?
Well, I didn't have any bow ties, and I would say the history of bow ties, myself and braeside, are intricately linked. Because I received my first 2 bow ties when I left Fairfield Hospital at the time to go to Liverpool Hospital, which was just before braeside opened, and I wasn't going to be coming back to Fairfield. and therefore the staff as a present gave me 2 bow ties. The motivation for the staff had been that my previous boss and mentor, Professor Hugh Dixon, had worn bow ties, and they thought as I became older and more distinguished, I should look like him.
So now we know. Final question, always in the profile series. What float
I have a family, I have a very supportive wife. You can't do this kind of work without a supportive family and a supportive wife. I have 4 children, so I try to give some time to them. I also assist in the International Society for Prosthetics and Orthotics, which is a voluntary organisation which has the aim to develop prosthetic and orthotics services in the narrower sense, but in a broader sense to assist in the rehabilitation of individuals around the globe, particularly in non-industrialised countries. So between those things, it keeps me busy.
You're also pretty musical.
I do play music, not so much at the moment because I don't have that much time, but I enjoy playing the piano. I used to play the organ in church when I was younger, and I still like playing the clarinet occasionally.
With your family?
With my family, and it's nice when all of us are together and 5 out of the 6 of us play musical instruments together. That gives me a real warm feeling because it means that the values of playing mainly classical music have been engendered into the whole family.
Great stuff. Friedbert, Kohler, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.